Welcome to Lifting the Lid on Technology, a podcast series brought to you by SoftSource in association with New Zealand's leading IT vendors and experts. I'm Barry White, VCIO Principal Consultant at SoftSource. In this series, we explore opportunities and challenges in the world of IT.
Well, this week we have Philip Meyer back again after the last couple of episodes. And for those who don't know Phil, he is the founder and director of Catalyst 345, formerly of Microsoft, and continues to this day to host the cloud and hosting partner network for Microsoft. So, Phil, I thought we'd pick up a couple of interesting points there. And I think, talking about, this whole compliance and security piece, and some people find that a little bit unexciting because it's a bit like telling people about their fridge freezers, right? But most businesses, and certainly this is true in New Zealand, I think, because obviously we're largely an SMB market, we use this term as security by obscurity, right? And people come up with this example of finding what salaries are and this sort of stuff. But I think what's more pertinent is this idea of oversharing, which for the most part is accidental. It's not malicious. People, they're just trying to do their jobs better. And they've gone through this period of sort of massive collaboration. We've introduced Microsoft Teams. People are now sharing stuff from their OneDrives. So they're not trying to be malicious, but that has opened up all sorts of information holes, right? And as I said, for the most part, people don't go looking for it because they probably don't know they can find it. But AI is really good at finding it, right? And in a matter of seconds, you can just say, hey, I want to find this out. And the chances are, if they ask the right prompt or put the right prompt in there, they're good chance they're probably going to find something they shouldn't, right?
And in fact, you're quite right. I think I shared with you last month the example I had of a private school here in Sydney where they put it in, and that comment you started with, security by obscurity, they didn't think that a student would ask the question, give me the salaries of all the teaching staff. But because it was security by obscurity, they never thought it was possible for that to be seen. But they hadn't done the SharePoint setting to restrict it to the group of teachers and administrators. So that's a simple case of they didn't overshare. It was just simply a case of security by obscurity. Oh, they've never been able to find it in the past. They won't find it with AI. Well, Copilot comes along, and if you say it can see all, it'll tell all. So you do need to take some conscious step. Now, to that end, I'm very pleased that Microsoft has now made available that data security posture management technology for AI as part of that add-on to Business Premium.
Yeah.
Now, 95% of enterprise businesses are already using Purview, is actually the big name for it. They're using this Purview technology, and the banks and insurers across Australia and New Zealand to give that, hey, we shouldn't share that SharePoint site. Alert goes off. Right, let's put the stop on that and govern it. Now they're making that available to small business, and that will help them with that particular technology to address the oversharing, the insider risk management, and many other elements that are important in governance. I take it seriously only because maybe I've worked in an enterprise customer business, Microsoft, for many years. We were educated about not sharing information. I was listening to a session the other day by one of the Microsoft security rangers, and he talked about like day one when AI came in, every document was classified as confidential. So that was just a blanket done across the business. So if you then wanted to gain access, you deliberately had to then instigate the sharing. That's a good place to start. Just immediately classify everything in the business as confidential. A label is set, done.
We're an ISO certified organization, and that's been, I think, not just from a technology point of view, but from a habit point of view is probably the word I'm looking for, has been a real education for everyone, right? It's really made everybody become a lot more self-effacing about how they're managing information. And a lot of the disciplines that we've learned from that ISO certification process, we're now applying to our customers, even though they're not ISO certified, and weaving those policies and procedures into Purview and things like sensitivity labels, as you touched
Yes.
on there. And you're right. I mean, it's one thing to trust people to do the right thing, but you have to assume they're not going to do the right thing. And as I said earlier, they're not going to do it maliciously. They're going to do it because they're trying to be more productive. But it's going to simply result in something that's undesirable. But I had a case. I'm not going to. I saw it firsthand. You mentioned about sharing, payroll information. I saw a case of a senior manager who yes, all the files were eventually published in the right place in SharePoint, and it was all locked down, and that was all cool. But during the draft phase, he had created the draft in his OneDrive in a folder that he was broadly sharing. And when he finished the draft version, this is how a lot of people work, of course, put it in the right place in SharePoint. Everybody was happy. It was secure. It was all that stuff. But he still had the original draft version in his OneDrive, and I was able to find it, right? So that was a good example of how, it goes deeper than people think, right?
Mhm.
And it'll come down to people's habits. And as I said, they're not being malicious. They're not meaning to not be careful, but it's just so easy to slip up, right?
It is. It is. Look, there are malicious people out there too. There are people
True.
who do, yeah, and that's why the insider risk management's a great little technology in that Purview suite too. To say somebody left 2 weeks ago, what did they download from SharePoints in recent times? Now, if I may, a little digression as well. It's interesting to think that the cyber criminals, effectively, in terms of the amount that they get from ransomware and that sort of stuff, puts them about the same size as Argentina,
Yeah.
about the 22nd biggest country in the planet.
Mm.
But if you some estimates are putting the amount of loss of intellectual property that is not known by business to being the third biggest economy on the planet.
Mm.
That's how much, during COVID times when they were losing formulas to various different medicines, when they were losing scientific diagrams, when they were losing price lists in a more small business context. I lost my price list. I lost my business plan. I lost my marketing proposal to a competitor because it
Mm.
wasn't protected. That accounts to, in value, the third biggest economy on the planet.
Mm. Mm.
So please, it is a serious thing to consider. Governance and compliancy. With AI comes great responsibility. With
Yeah,
great power comes great responsibility, in the words of Spider-Man.
absolutely. Well, I think that's probably a great sort of point for us to maybe wind up. But before I let you go, Phil, and you've managed to get away with this in our last couple of episodes, but I'm not going to let you get away with it this time. I like to ask my guests some few little fun questions. Although the first one is probably not a fun question at all. It's probably quite a serious question, this line. So my question is, I mean, what surprised you the most since stepping outside of Microsoft, where you were there for 35 years, for listeners who've missed the last couple of episodes, and looking at this from the outside, what surprised you the most so far?
Because I do need to think about that a bit. Because it's actually it was like a firework went off because there's a whole bunch of things that I have noticed since leaving. I might start with an obvious one. It's very different on the outside than the inside. If you're in a fishbowl and looking out, your your vision is distorted by the shape of that curved glass.
Yeah.
So inside the fishbowl that I would look at the world from the context of being in the fishbowl and think things were distorted. The distortions were, this is about products. I've got to sell products, product. I've got a target to sell a product when I was in the bowl. When you're outside the bowl, I need a solution. I need an outcome. And I've got a whole bunch of other things that go on in my life other than that siloed product. And Microsoft has 40 different silos. Their AI solution is made up of 40 components. So that realization, you do need to have a holistic conversation and appreciation as a Microsoft person that if you go in and you've got a target on your back around Microsoft 365, you should be able to pivot and go, this isn't a Microsoft 365 Copilot conversation. This is actually a studio conversation. This is a compliance conversation. This is a conversation around enabling them in a business process around supply chain. And I didn't see that on the inside, but I now see it on the outside. Second, and I won't go any further than that, is takes a lot to run a business. Even if it's a little business of two, you still got to get your invoicing right. You still got to get purchase orders right for your quotes. You get burnt when you don't get a PO back and you put out a quote and then you do the work. Now, well, there's no PO. That sort of stuff, that operational stuff, was all done for you when you're an enterprise. There's a lot of other things. And you probably don't have to worry about who's putting drinks in the fridge or toilet paper on the rolls. But those sorts of things, when you're running a small business, you're suddenly drawn into thinking about, wow, my computer's not working. I've got to go and get it fixed. Now I've got to go find somebody who's going to fix it or go and buy one. In the old days, I just used to take the computer in and you'd get a new one. So that operational side of going from a big business to a small business and thinking about tax and GST and international transactions like us and things like that, you got to go and do a whole lot of research. So, two things I think that I've given you there: inside the fishbowl, and now you're out, and operational needs to develop some operational efficiency. Thank gosh, I've got Microsoft 365 Copilot to help me with that.
I was about to give you a hard time about that. So I was going to say, sounds like you need some agents. I mean, you and I can share those war stories. I wasn't in Microsoft that long. I was only there 2 years, but just to share you my perspective on that one, I went from traveling around the country as the Azure lead for SMB, shaking lots of hands and doing presentations as you tend to do at Microsoft. And often realizing that a lot of the people I met, I'd probably never ever see again. Right? It was a very light touch environment. Whereas I then came into SoftSource as a VCIO, and the big shift really, and it was actually my motivation for doing it, to be honest, was that I really enjoy the journey. I love to work with customers on the journey all the way through, and that can often be years long, right? So the fact that you become a trusted person with that organization and you go with them on the journey, I think this is going to be the same with AI, which I'm really excited about, and then see the outcomes from where they started and where they ended up. I find that personally and professionally very satisfying, right? So,
Yeah, it's interesting. You've had that journey. To me, it's kind of having worked retail in my first job and meeting customers in a sports store, which had footballs and tennis rackets and toys, and needing to understand that when a customer came in, they just weren't after one thing. And so my joy came from when they walked out with a balsa wood playing with a motor in it, plus a push bike and a fluffy toy for another kid, that they'd have that diversity. So working retail, I think, is really important to have done in your job. And also worked in a customer for a project and seeing a project from beginning to end through, not just selling a product, a component part, but I think, to be an effective sales, marketing, even technical person, you've got to have been involved in that project. And I won't go into it, but I had the joy of being part of some fairly substantial national-wide projects as a project manager and technical lead, and see that from beginning to end, which took years, is some of the best times to get through. Difficult, but joy at the end.
Okay, so I was going to ask you a fun question. So here it is. What's the most overused phrase in AI right now?
Hype.
Sorry? Hype. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that it is hype. I think it
No,
is.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it really is here. It's transformational.
Yeah.
This is, to me, as big as electricity. This is, I'm going electricity.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. I'm going to go to a motor car. I'm not going to ride my horse except for weekends and a bit of fun, but I'm going to drive to work now. I'm using public transport. What did you do before? Walked, or you just didn't go anywhere? So it's not a hype. So it's overused because people are using the word hype.
Yeah. No, look, and I think you gave some greater analogies earlier on, some of which I think I might plagiarize if you don't mind. They were really good. And look, conscious of the time as always, Phil, it's been fun. And maybe I can twist your arm and get you back on and we can carry on this conversation.
I hope so. I think there's some really good things that we could explore, mate. I think that there's some things, if you don't mind, if I seed some thoughts to encourage you to have me back. I'd like to have that conversation between small business and big business, the decision framework around that.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to explore, if it's okay with you, the idea of what does happen to SaaS applications.
No.
The whole idea of forms. Like I got to go to the doctor's got a sore ear, so I go to the doctor and I go and I fill in a form. It's like I filled in this form with the other doctor. Why do I have to keep filling this in? It's the same data. And I tell people to use the Edge browser because at least it remembers some of the fields and it pre-populates and auto-fills. But why can't I have a package of data and I say, yep, give that package of data to that trusted entity and just fill it in for me?
I've had a little thing I had written down in my notes here. AI replaces forms with conversations.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm going to use that from you.
Yeah. No, it's yours. It's yours. All right. It's a date, Phil. I'm going to hold you to it.
Okay.
Until next time.
Until next time.
All
Thanks,
right.
Barry.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
See you.
Bye.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Lifting the Lid on Technology. To learn more about how SoftSource can support you on any of the topics covered today, visit svbgroup.co.nz purview.com/insights or find us on LinkedIn. I'm Barry White, and thank you for listening. Join us next time.